Welcome to Balkans Debrief, where we focus into the heart of the Balkans' most pressing issues. I am Ilva Tare, a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Europe Center in Washington, D.C., and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, U.S. Senator Chris Murphy, a true friend to Kosovo and Serbia, as he stated fresh from his recent visit in the region. Senator Murphy played a crucial role in urging for the de-escalation of tensions between Kosovo and Serbia, and thanks to a broad bipartisan support in the Senate, the parties were called to address the fragile security situation in the north of Kosovo. Knowing that Russia's aggression in Ukraine makes the matter even more urgent. And I trust Senator Murphy will shed light into the stark reality of the consequences that could arise from a failure to de-escalate, jeopardizing the progress achieved thus far in supporting Kosovo and Serbia on their respective paths forward. What repercussions will Prime Minister Kurti and President Vučić face if they fail to take immediate steps towards resolution? What's your impression where the region is today, particularly the situation in the north of Kosovo after the recent clashes?
Well, I'm very lucky to be a frequent visitor to the region. I have a very strong diaspora from the Balkans, in particular a strong Albanian American population in my state. And every time that I visit the region, I'm both amazed by how much progress has been made, but also concerned about the fact that there are so many conflicts that are simmering and remain unresolved. We spent a good deal of time in both Serbia and Kosovo, and I've been in contact with leaders from those countries since I got back. Obviously, some of the scenes we are watching of violent conflict in the northern regions of Kosovo are very concerning. We saw such progress and promise with the Ohrid Agreement, which looked to set a path upon which both Serbia and Kosovo could travel in order to get normalization. We are now decidedly off that path, and it's up to the United States and Europe and citizens of both those countries to demand that we get back on schedule. The kind of concessions that are necessary here, establishing an association of Serb municipalities, Serbia getting out of the way when it comes to Kosovo's attempts to gain international recognition. These are not insurmountable obstacles, and we should be able to get back on track.
Senator Murphy, you said during your visit in the region that you are a friend to Kosovo and to Serbia, but also you warned that specific actions or measures should the United States take to prevent further conflict in the region. Can you walk us through these potential steps that will be taken into consideration if the de-escalation in the north will not happen? What will be the consequences for Kosovo and for Serbia?
Well, listen, the only point I have made is that the United States has a major military presence inside Kosovo. We're proud of that presence. We have a growing economic relationship with Serbia and a growing security relationship with Serbia, as Serbia is doing more to help Ukraine in its fight against Russia. And my message is very simple. My constituents are not going to be as willing to send money into the region if they don't see leaders taking the common sense steps necessary to maintain peace. I think some of the steps that have been taken in northern Kosovo over the last 30 days have been unnecessarily provocative. And my message to both leaders is that I want a deeper relationship between the United States, Serbia, the United States, and Kosovo, but that can only happen if both leaders take the steps necessary to get normalization back on track.
How did Prime Minister Kurti, with whom you had a phone call during the tensions in the north of Kosovo, about the possibility of losing congressional support if the situation remains unresolved?
I think it's really important that Prime Minister Kurti make the tough decisions necessary to win peace and to get a pathway to normalization with Serbia. That's good for his people. It is good for Kosovo to have more normal relations with Serbia. It is good for Kosovo to be able to confidently apply for membership in both NATO and the European Union, two things that cannot happen if Kosovo continues to have this very fractious relationship with Serbia. Now, once Prime Minister Kurti went forward with the decision to have the elections in northern Kosovo, it made sense for there to be a swearing in. But I simply don't believe he had to push the one particular mayor to gain access to a municipal building, which the government in Pristina knew would set off a reaction that would eventually turn violent. U.S. troops are in Kosovo. U.S. troops are part of the force that NATO has provided to protect Kosovo. And I just think that decisions in Pristina right now are unnecessarily putting NATO forces at risk. That's something that Congress is never going to be interested in funding. NATO troops, U.S. troops, being put at unnecessary risk of harm.
Given the latest flare-up, what role could the Association of the Serb majority municipalities play in a meaningful resolution, in your view? And do you sense any political will in the Pristina's government to implement the ASM?
Well, the Kosovo government has made several commitments on paper to establish the association as recently as the Ohrid agreement. This seems to be, to me, a relatively small and reasonable concession in order to gain normal relationships with a normal relationship with Serbia. We're not talking about the full devolution of federal powers to an association of towns. In fact, we're not talking about amending the Constitution at all. What this association would simply do is allow these towns, who already have powers to provide certain services, to do so in coordination and to make sure that the levels of healthcare and education funding that have been traditionally presented to those Serb communities living in northern Kosovo continue. So I think that the establishment of this association in coordination with new elections can really open up a new chapter of better relations between Serbia and Kosovo, and can get Kosovo in particular much more concretely on the path towards its European and NATO future.
Senator Murphy, the order you mentioned was the ASM and then the elections. Do you believe that should be the order of things happening?
Well, listen, I'm not on the ground negotiating with President Vučić and Prime Minister Kurti, so I'm not dictating any specific order of events. It seems that the elections have to happen very soon. That is probably the most important thing that needs to happen in order to stem and end this crisis. But there's no reason why the association can't move forward immediately. Prime Minister Kurti has had plenty of time to draft a reasonable framework for this association. Time is of the essence, both when it comes to elections and the establishment of the association, but also time is of the essence when it comes to Serbia's obligations. Serbia needs to stop taking its own provocative actions in the north, riling up Serbian communities, and Serbia also has to make sure that it is allowing Kosovo to join these international institutions instead of standing up roadblock after roadblock.
Senator, how do you address concerns about an unbalanced response by the United States and the EU, placing the main responsibility on Kosovo for the crisis in the north? What about lack of condemnation towards armed militia allegedly involved in the situation, as Prime Minister Kurti said?
Well, no one should be of the illusion that the United States and Kosovo are not inextricably linked together. We, of course, more so than any other country, are responsible for the existence of Kosovo, and we have provided billions of US dollars and thousands of US troops to defend the sovereignty of Kosovo. But sometimes friends need to deliver tough messages to friends. And the precipitating actions that caused this last crisis in northern Kosovo were made in Pristina. The decision to require these mayors to occupy those municipal buildings after an election in which only 3% of the electorate turned out was an unnecessarily provocative act. And I and other leaders in the United States are just going to call it like it is. I have plenty of criticism for the Serbian government. I have been very open in my displeasure at their failure to join the United States and Europe in sanctions against Russia. Over and over, the Serbian government has taken acts in northern Kosovo that have discouraged peace. But what happened 2 or 3 weeks ago did not have to happen. And if Pristina had made a different decision, we likely could still be on track towards the components of the Ohrid agreement being effectuated.
Talking about Serbia, a recent Financial Times article revealed that Serbia has been shipping ammunition to Ukraine, which seemingly aligned Belgrade, Russia's closest ally in the Balkans, with the West. Has this decision, in your view, Senator, in a way influenced the U.S. approach towards Serbia?
Well, we have been very clear with Serbia from the beginning that we think it's in the interests of the Serbian people for the Serbian government to align with the United States and Europe in this fight for Ukraine's sovereignty. Nations in the Balkans know the cost of war. They know the price of territorial sovereignty being breached. And this is a moment where we are deciding whether the post-World War II order remains. And for Serbia's people, who very much see their future economically aligned with Europe, I think there will be very little enthusiasm in Brussels to bring Serbia into the EU if Serbia decides to sit on the sidelines. I can't confirm, media reports about some of these transfers. All I can say is we continue to make the case to Serbia that it is in their interest to join us both on defense and economic policy when it comes to protecting Ukraine.
And how do you view the ongoing protests in Belgrade? Also, another New York Times article connects President Vučić to organized hooligans in Serbia. How do you view the cooperation with the Serbian government and the credibility of President Vučić?
Well, one of the things that I talk to President Vučić regularly about is the weakening of democracy in Serbia, the lack of a true independent press, and I really worry for the future of Serbia if there isn't the ability of the press to hold the government accountable, and if there isn't the ability for the opposition to present a real choice to voters. This is a frequent topic of discussion that I and other visitors to Serbia have with the government. So at some level, I'm heartened to see that there are so many people out on the streets exercising their democratic rights. And we have not seen a sort of show of force from the government to try to break up those protests. I just want to make sure that Serbia remains a democratic country, a place where it's up to the voters as to who their leaders are in the future.
Senator Murphy, how do you view Russian involvement in the region and the role in the latest crisis in the north of Kosovo?
Well, in general, Russia, has very clear interests to destabilize the Balkans. They, of course, are very upset that country after country in the Western Balkans has made the decision to orient itself towards NATO and towards the EU. The most brazen act of Russian aggression, perhaps, was their attempt to organize a violent coup in Montenegro. Of course, much of Russia's activity in the region has backfired. Today, Montenegro's government is solidly behind EU integration and NATO partnership. Even this new government, which had a political alliance with Serb communities who have not always been as favorable to EU integration has pledged to stay the course. So Russia is going to continue to try to destabilize countries economically and politically, but what makes me so positive about the future trajectory of the region is that in the face of that Russian provocation and interference, country after country in the region still seems confident that they want a future with the United States and with Europe.
Last question. Is there a way forward for the normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo from the current situation? How can diplomatic efforts be strengthened to facilitate dialogue and compromise between Pristina and Belgrade?
Envoy Lajcak has put a very concrete proposal on the table that is backed by the United States. There is certainly a path with new elections, the establishment of the ASM, and Serbia living up to its commitments for us to get the Brussels agreement and follow-on agreements like ORID back on the rails. But it's going to take real courage on behalf of the leaders in both Belgrade and Pristina. I will likely be on the phone with President Vučić this week, making the same case to him that I made to Prime Minister Kurti, that it's time to set differences aside. It's time to get on a path towards immediate de-escalation and normalization.
Senator Murphy, thank you.